Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, March 20th, 2022, and today we are going to be taking a look at the House of Representatives elections that is coming up this November for the 2022 midterms. And from the title of this video, I'm sure you can tell that today's topic is going to be a combination of redistricting and more explaining why the Republican Party still maintains their advantage despite a number of congressional maps actually shifting away from the Republican Party in terms of overall support. Looking at our map between the new and the old, the Democratic Party has already reached where they were in the old congressional map versus the Republicans, which seem to be lagging behind by about 10 to 20 seats. And seeing such a significant change, you might be thinking the Democratic Party has the upper hand. And I have been talking about how the Democratic Party is doing everything they can in order to combat an eventual Republican victory. That means turning states that were previously competitive into Republican strongholds, such as Texas, which used to have a number of competitive districts, enough so that at some point the Democratic Party could technically win the majority in the state of Texas, to now solidifying every single seat except for one. And that's really where the big bummer comes in for the Democratic Party, that some of these states are now out of reach, even in a blue wave year. But the Democratic Party is also counteracted by turning in states such as New York into heavy gerrymanders or Illinois into even more gerrymanders. They've won successful court cases in Ohio and North Carolina and are likely going to be able to see a successful change of the proposed map in Louisiana and the state of New Hampshire. It's a very interesting thing that's happening right now, and the Democratic Party is ultimately coming out ahead. But that doesn't mean the Republican Party still isn't favored to win control of the House. I think there has been a lot of misconstruement of my argument as someone who has been pointing out truthfully that the Democratic Party does come out ahead as a result of these brand new maps, but I have never once stated for 2022 that the Democratic Party is favored to maintain control of the House of Representatives. I think it has been very clear from the beginning, even when Biden was approved of by heavy amounts, that the Republican Party would inevitably win control this November year. And it was just so obvious in terms of historical context, in terms of what we were expecting, and we knew that this honeymoon period would not last forever. And as of August of 2021, that became true. The disapproval rating became above the approval rating, and it has maintained since then, ever since. It becomes increasingly more difficult for Joe Biden to recover in terms of his approval. He saw a slight bump as a response to the State of the Union, to a point where his approval rating was only about down -9 points. It has since resumed to being down about 11 points nationwide and only seems to be getting worse. So there are a bunch of reasons why I would say straight off the bat the Republican Party has an advantage when it comes down to our upcoming 2022 House elections. I think that it has become even more obvious now that Republicans are going to be able to win control. And I think looking at where they stand, the Republican Party only needing, technically speaking, only needing 5 seats in order to win control of the House, it is 100% within reach and 90% likely going to happen. I think there are very off chances that the Democratic Party does maintain control of the House, but I don't think it is likely by any means, and it would take a significant change in national environment and national circumstance. So, talking about the losses here that the Republican Party has endured, you're talking about Illinois, you're talking about Oregon, you're talking about the state of North Carolina, which never really was expected to be a loss for the Republican Party until they went too extreme in their gerrymander. Democrats also succeeded in gerrymandering New York, in maintaining the gerrymander in many states, such as Maryland, right? Maintaining many of these advantages. They gerrymandered California despite it being a state that technically has an independent commission. Here's the catch. Every single one of these Democratic incumbents has a seat that is Biden plus 10 or more. Every single one of these incumbents. I think the number actually might be Biden plus 20 or more. So seeing all these incumbents in very safe positions, I think with the exception of one in particular, which a new seat, I think Devin Nunes' seat, has turned into a safe seat for the Democratic Party. What you are now finding is that the Democrats are solidified in the nation's most populous state. It's a state that gives the Republican Party routinely about 30% of the vote statewide, and yet Republicans at best are going to be getting maybe 7, 8 seats across the state. Very interesting to see, but the Democratic Party absolutely succeeded through the state of California and has gerrymandered this state into being an overwhelmingly strong Democratic advantage. And you see that. Illinois, New York, North Carolina, California, right? A bunch of different states, Oregon, You have status quos maintained in states such as Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, where Democrats and Republicans are now at equal footing compared to where they were in the past election. Even if Republicans have the advantage, it is maintained, but still, Democrats aren't losing seats. So these are the losses that the Republican Party has ultimately endured, despite them having a 100-seat advantage over the Democratic Party. But that still doesn't hinder them enough to prevent them from winning control in 2022. Looking at the 2022 circumstance that we are in right now, Joe Biden is unpopular. Democrats are down nationwide, and there seems to be every indication that the Republican Party is going to win back control of the House of Representatives. And even though we have not finished our entire redistricting cycle, the final states that remain are New Hampshire, Missouri, Louisiana, Florida, and potentially Ohio. We won't talk about Ohio for the sake of this video because those in opposition to the map made a mistake when it came down to court filing, so there's a bit of drama there. Discussion for another video. We'll get another video because it is a very interesting case of the court being, nitpicky about a particular subject because they have to be. They won't be able to address the case without it actually being filed correctly, finding a discrepancy saying that you have to completely redo the process. It might not be enough time for the primaries to occur, and if the primaries occur, the courts might be inclined, keep in mind a Republican-controlled court, the courts might be inclined to ultimately say, we made the mistake, you guys made the mistake, couldn't file in time, and the primaries have already occurred, so to change up the districts so drastically as a last-minute decision isn't our main objective. The fair map should have happened, but ultimately we are stuck with these, and that's going to be a discussion later down the line. But Missouri, Louisiana, Florida, and New Hampshire, the good thing for the Republican Party here that furthers my point is that these states are likely to maintain the status quo. And while Republicans won't necessarily like that because it doesn't advance where they are right now, New Hampshire's gerrymander just got told to be vetoed by the governor there, so it looks like it's going to go back to being about equal footing for both parties, potentially 2 Republican seats in 2022 compared to the map the Republicans put forth, which would be 1 Democrat and 1 Republican. Technically, Democrats could still win both of these 2 new seats if the Chris Sununu type of map that he's expecting to see goes through is a real possibility, but probably not the likeliest outcome. New Hampshire seems to be vetoed by the Republican governor there, but still maintaining the status quo no matter how you draw the map. It's a Republican trifecta state, so we'll see what happens there. Florida seems to be a state where the Republican Party could actually gain maybe 1 or 2 seats, depending on whose map gets confirmed, based off of what the courts decide. You have Louisiana, which just the governor here, the Democrat, vetoed, but it looks like it might be overturned, or the courts might decide that a map that is maintaining the status quo will move forward. There's practically, not a super high chance that there's going to be 2 Democratic districts, but only time will tell. And the state of Missouri looks like it's going to go ahead and maintain the status quo as well, maintaining the standard number of Democratic seats here, 2 to the Republican Party's 6. So overall, the finalized states, all the states that have been done, have given the Democratic Party a bump up, an upper hand to the Republican Party. But the remaining states will not continue that streak. It will just simply maintain what we have right now. There are no more Democratic victories to come, or at least so we think for right now. So keeping that in mind, we know that with redistricting nearly underway, we will find the Republican Party in a position where, sure, they've lost some ground, but still has a very significant amount of striking distance, a very significant amount of seats that they could go ahead and target. And I would also point out that looking at our 2022 House of Representatives elections, if you want to actually take a look at what the Republican Party has gone ahead and focused on, you have a significant amount of seats. The Republican Party at this point in time says that they are targeting 70 seats from the Democratic Party. The Democrats, however, has said that they are going after 26 Republican seats. The Republicans have 70 targets. The Democrats only have 26. It shows that the Democratic Party absolutely recognizes that they are going to be playing defense, that they are going to be the ones defending their territory while making minor advancements, going after some incumbents, but not most. And that makes sense. They would not go after most incumbents because they are not the party that is expected to gain seats, and the Republican Party absolutely is. So straight off that, you know that the Republican Party has 70 seats and the Democratic Party has 26 that they are targeting, meaning the Republican Party has more room for failure and also more room for winning capability. Another thing I would point to is also just simply Biden's approval rating and the generic ballot. There really is no data indicating the Republican Party is going to lose seats. There are some generic ballot polls that tend to conflict with the overall average, and I would say that I still trust the average. I think Republicans are up nationwide, and I think some of these polls, while skewing the overall data, don't necessarily indicate the Democratic Party is ahead. It might show us that the American public isn't exactly solidified behind the Republican Party, but they were previously solidified behind Democrats in 2020 and 2018, and partially in 2016, so I would argue that the Republican Party ultimately comes out ahead of here like they did in 2002 and 2014, when the numbers were showing the exact same thing. In addition to that, when you're taking a look at this map here, the Republican Party just simply has opportunities that the Democratic Party does not. The Republicans know which states, saw major flips in 2018, and they can walk back taking older incumbents and bringing them back into their congressional seats. The Democratic Party has a lot of newcomers, and while that is a good thing, it would only be a good thing if these incumbents were able to establish themselves over the process of 8 years, like Republicans were able to after the 2010 election cycle. After 2010, the Republican Party was able to win elections there. They redistricted, and these incumbents won again, and they were able to build a name for themselves, being able to build up that name recognition across the district, remain popular, and maintain that advantage for many, many years to come. And that simply was the case. Then, all of a sudden, 2018 occurred, and a bunch of them lost, and these new incumbents came in. But by the time you saw 2020, by the time you now see 2022, these incumbents don't have this ingrained name recognition within these districts, or at least public approval that these Republicans might have had, and thus there could be a bunch of repeat and return candidates, as you typically see in on and off wave years for either political party. And I would also like to point out that it isn't just the generic ballot or the public approval rating or the process of redistricting that is telling us that the Republican Party is going to win control of the House. It is also the way that we see these ratings. There are election ratings when it comes down to the 2022 House elections. There are a bunch of competitive seats that people are expecting to see close and competitive. What you are finding is that many of these races are going back and forth. And if you take a look at the seats that are expected to flip based off of where we stand right now. Keep in mind, with Republicans up just 2.3% on the generic ballot, the Republican Party currently has 8 total flips, and the Democrats have 4. That means, overall by net, if every single seat maintains where they were before, in addition to just these 12 seats that are expected to flip at this point in time, the Republican Party comes ahead by 4 seats, not winning the majority, but just 1 seat away. And considering that we almost always underestimate the amount Republicans are going to do when it comes down to the national popular vote and overall performance in these down ballot races, you can probably expect that there just is some 1 to maybe 10 races that are underestimated for the Republican Party that very likely could flip in favor of that political party, in favor of the GOP this November. I think there's just a lot going on when it comes down to what we see. It's the targets, it's the generic ballot, it's the current House ratings, it's the older House ratings, it's the historical context, and it's also just the fact that the Republican Party seems to be popular right now. Not necessarily popular meaning that the American public adores them, that they have a 60% approval rating, but more so that they are outpacing the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has a trifecta, but many people render it as ineffective. Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, being these blockades for Democrats in the United States Senate does hinder their ability to govern. And that's just the standard part of it. Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema argued that they were not elected under these ideals that national Democrats are pushing, that Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are pushing, and thus they oppose it. And while the opposition may be founded in their own moral beliefs and their own, stances on policies, it does look bad for the general Democratic Party, and thus hinders their ability to remain popular amongst the American public. They were handed a trifecta following the 2020 election. The average American voter doesn't really care that the filibuster is holding them up, and thus the Democratic Party is going to be punished, even if it isn't necessarily their fault, or maybe it's the fault of 2 senators who seem to be opposing them on many, many cases. But at the end of the day, that's just American politics, and, someone could just argue that you should have won 2 additional Senate seats back in 2020 and ask why you didn't. So a lot of discussion goes into the Democratic Party and them being viewed as ineffective across the nation. But generally speaking, even if they were effective, I still think the Republican Party would be able to maintain and win control of the House of Representatives in 2022. It's just history. Joe Biden's big thing was returning us to a sense of normalcy, and with that return to a sense of normalcy means that the American public is going to start treating Joe Biden how they treated presidents prior to Donald Trump, meaning that in a midterm year, you're always going to lose seats. And considering that the Democratic Party in the last election didn't exactly win by a lot, means that there's just so many opportunities for the GOP to win. I look at this map and I see 222 to 213, and immediately from that alone, I know the Republican Party is going to find the seats. It just becomes so unlikely that the Democratic Party lucks out in many of these close and competitive races, enough so that they maintain control. The Democrats might have been able to make advancements when it came down to congressional redistricting, and I don't doubt that. But I do think that it's just not enough to overcome what we are expecting to be happening in this November. You know, the Republican Party will have the House. I, again, say that very, very confidently. It's just too many things seemingly adding up against the Democratic Party for me to say with any type of confidence that the Democratic Party is going to retain the majority. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's not likely at all. I think it becomes, less than a 10, maybe 5% chance that the Democratic Party is able to do it. It would mean a significant change in public approval of Biden. It would mean a significant change in the generic ballot. It would mean that more redistricting wins need to occur. Maybe Ohio needs to pull through and give Democrats 3 to 4 seats to gain. Florida might need to go to the courts, and potentially Democrats might need to see a gain there. Louisiana would have to go their way. New Hampshire would have to go their way. There's a lot of hoops that the Democratic Party has successfully jumped through in order to expand their quote-unquote majority in these new congressional maps. But it seems that it's being walked back every single time gas prices rise, every single time Biden takes a dip in approval, every single time a new poll releases that shows the Republican Party with the advantage nationwide. And that's where the major concern comes in here for the Democratic Party. As much as they would like to, make these advancements through gerrymandering the same way Republicans did in 2010, the same way Democrats and Republicans have done for centuries. The problem now lies in the fact that there is just too much pushing back on the Democratic Party, that these seemingly major advancements when it comes down to the House map, these major wins, which are major wins because in 2024, it could hand the Democratic Party back the majority, or 2026 or 2028 because of the way they have drawn the maps now. But in the immediate future, it simply isn't enough to counteract it, and I don't think I would say with confidence of any sort that the Democratic Party would be able to maintain control of the House of Representatives. The only realistic avenue for the Democratic Party to prevent the Republicans from being completely obstructionist is through the United States Senate. The House is a done deal. It takes Republicans 5 seats. They already have a net 4. They just need to make some more advancements. And considering that our generic ballot is at a point where about 16 to 70% of the nation is undecided, I guarantee you by the time November comes around, they're going to make a decision, and they're more than likely going to choose the GOP. I think the Senate is the only real opportunity for the Democratic Party to maintain where they are right now. They have some pickup opportunities. They have North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, realistically speaking. Republicans also have 4, which means Republicans are going to be playing a lot of offense. Democrats are mostly going to be playing defense, so we will see what happens. It's still a possibility that Democrats do maintain control of the Senate. I think it's a lot more likely than it is for the House of Representatives, but I still think the Republican Party is favored to win both, but we will see later down the line. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.